edition of the Daily Cheat Sheet. And let's get straight to the news. There's a lot going on. There's a lot going on for the first time, I believe, since 1965. The president has called in the National Guard without the governor's approval because of the riots that are going on in Los Angeles, which is, when you think about it, that's 50 years ago. And that's an incredible amount of time. Obviously, the National Guard has been called up since then. It was called up under Nixon and had terrible consequences. And it was also called up during first Bush. But I think this is an extremely important event in our history because, Mend, as you brought up, we're about to witness something in our country, which is the Intifada is here. When you look at the flags that are being raised at these things, as you keep on bringing up, terrorism is here and President Trump is trying to cut it off.
Yeah, I mean, this is not an isolated incident exclusive to the Israel-Gaza war. We've seen these same people, and they do that by cell phone data, the same people that show up at BLM riots, that showed up at the Kamala rallies, that show up at the Gaza stuff, are now showing up at this immigration stuff. It's well organized. The same pallets of rocks and bricks that were being dropped off during the BLM riots are being dropped on the streets in areas that they know that are going to be friction points with authorities. They need to figure out who's funding this stuff, where the money's coming from, and I think they're going to get to the bottom of that. They're arresting a lot of these people. The media keeps on reporting this as mostly peaceful, but you're seeing highways blocked, cars blown up, people hurling rocks at federal vehicles. They need to put an end to this. These are the same people, the anarchists, that just want to burn down these cities. My take on that is that these are a bunch of losers that feel that opportunity has left them, and there are those that have made it and they're doing well and they're successful, and these people are still living in their mother's basements and they want to burn everything down so that it's equal again and they have a fair shot of getting somewhere, or just misery loves company and they just want to live in misery with everyone else. The governor and the mayor, Karen Bass, Gavin Newsom, they're on the side of anarchy. They're not on the side of protecting their citizens. These people put the rights of rioters ahead of tax-paying, law-abiding citizens. Your kids are supposed to go to school as they pass by these anarchists that are hurling Molotov cocktails at police vehicles. It's not sustainable. The population that votes for these people are starting to wake up. From the LA wildfires, where we saw complete incompetence on the part of our government. They had the water reservoirs empty in the height of fire season. They were more focused on DEI and which marginalized person they could put in charge of these departments that had no idea what they were doing. Instead of getting the best and the brightest who could fight fires, they had people that checked off a lot of boxes. The people in LA are starting to wake up. They're realizing that this government, these people that they keep on electing based on best DEI practices, does not make a well-functioning city work. This government is billions of dollars in debt. There's a deficit. California had a surplus. Now there's a deficit. They are spending billions of dollars on healthcare for migrants. This is completely unsustainable, and that's why America First actually resonates really well in this state, because people are waking up and realizing that these people are putting everybody else first.
Well said. Mend actually hasn't spoken since Friday, so he had a lot bottled up inside of him. Go on to. There's a lot to unpack there, but news-wise, it's extremely important. Mend brought up a few things. First of all, again, the reporting of the peaceful riot, of the peaceful protests, where we have actual video of smoke. And most importantly, another thing he brought up was the fire. Imagine if they had treated the first fire, it wouldn't have jumped. And that's the problem with riots. And that's almost seems to be the mission of these so-called protesters, is it for to jump. Trump sees this and is preventing the jump. And it's literally which side right now will win, the protesters or the government.
Absolutely. And I would say you could even take it a step further back, because while you could say they needed to treat the first fire, and that way there wouldn't have been a spread of additional fires after the fact, what if they had cleared the brush? What if they had done what was necessary prior to the fire? They wouldn't have even had to deal with one of them. And it's the same thing here. You can look back, as Mend kind of touched upon, you can look back, and you can see that there is an intersection between all of these groups. Whether you're talking about BLM, whether you're talking about Antifa, whether you're talking about the Free Palestine pieces of shit, or whether you're talking about anybody else, the intersection is not an accident. It's not a coincidence. It is called an activist syndicate. It is why they use the same tactics. They use the same hashtags. They use the same slogans. Everything is happening over and over again. And if you look back to when BLM started, and they already had Palestine stuff within their mandate, and you look back even further, and you see that before BLM launched, Palestinian activists came in to teach them how to be activists against the government and against good people. The intersection is so clear over and over again. So if you had gone back, like Freakonomics style, to when they first began causing trouble, and you had cut them off at the knee, it would have been free the first fire igniting and free anything jumping anywhere. Because once there is a group, the society of a grievance-based kind of collectivist nightmare, well, then it's too late. They start spreading, and the goal is to incite other people and to get the academic elites and the corporate shills and the media apologists and everyone else to cheer them on, even if it's subtle, from the sidelines, sometimes not so subtle. At that point, it takes someone to stand up and say enough. Right now, speaking of the news, Trump doing this thing you're talking about, sending them in for the first time in a very long time, he saw clearly what's coming. He saw clearly what's happening right now. And that's why he's sending in the troops, because you have to set the red line. You have to say, this is a country where you don't get to destroy the republic, whether you're calling it justice or social justice or activism or anything else. You don't get to do that. And so we got to cut it off now before not only continues this time, but for the next group to see this doesn't work. So we may as well not start this bullshit.
And they're already headed to San Francisco, but I want to just say what I find important. What the two of you are doing is giving history and context on a current news story, which I think is extremely important for people out there because everything is forgotten. Everybody, again, like I brought up the other day, everybody forgets there was a toilet paper shortage 4 years ago. That's how quickly our memories go. And it's extremely important to do what both of you are doing with this news story. It's not just giving commentary, but it's giving it in historical reference. So I thank you both for that. Man, I know you want to say something else.
I'm not a blind Trump follower, and I think nobody should be. I think at every point when the government does something, local government or federal government, what you should do is look at how that impacts your life. And here, once again, the local government, Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass, are taking the side of rioters while the president is coming in and taking the side of law and order and citizens. So on this one, I will fall on the side of President Trump and I will applaud him for what he's doing. This is what needs to be done. You need an adult in the room, and there's an adult in the room who's sending in the troops to corral these rioters, these anarchists that want to burn down the city and lock them up or deport them. That's what needs to be done. And so in every instance, I would suggest that you look at how that affects you. Forget about party allegiance. There's so many people coming out, liberals, saying, oh, we're going to hold strong. They say peaceful protests, but the protests are not peaceful. So they're supporting this anarchy that's burning down their own city because they are party loyalists. I'm not a party loyalist. I go with policies that work for me, best for me and my family. And I suggest everybody does that.
Well said. And go on to Men's point. It was extremely disappointing. And this is the issue for people that live outside of this city or state of California, the city of Los Angeles and the state of California. We had Rick Caruso, who is, I guess, a billionaire who started the Grove, and he had his own fire service when the fires were going on. He went after Gavin Newsom, he went after Karen Bass. And all of a sudden, yesterday or the day before, he comes out and says, we don't need the National Guard here. And he goes on a rant against Trump. And we can't, and this is what's frustrating to people in Los Angeles. We can't get somebody that's even a centrist. They always have to think they have to thread the needle in order to become the governor. Just speak the truth. You might win. That's what we are lacking, Golan.
Absolutely. This thing where he's crumbling to the mob, kowtowing to the mob. I'm not even sure what the point is, right? Is it because he wants to be mayor? Is it because he's trying to position himself as a hero to, I don't know, democratic activist mobs because he thinks that that's what the masses want? It seems like so weak-kneed. It seems so counterintuitive to who he was. It feels like political posturing, and honestly, it just feels sad. If you ask me, I could keep talking about this. I could go on a further critique about it, but really, it just seems like all the other people who stand firm on something. Like I'll give an example that happened recently. Juliette Binoche at the Cannes Film Festival had her own reasoning, her own family history for not wanting to sign something that was pro-terrorist. And then everyone came at her from every angle. Hey, why didn't you sign? Why didn't you sign it online, in person, this, that? And finally, a couple of days later, after we were like, hey, good for her, she signed something. A couple of days later, and it was just so disappointing. Just felt like weakness. And this I see over and over again. People who are like, it's easier to just sign the document that says I love terrorists and I'm anti-goodness because I don't want to be harassed.
Let's not forget, I mean, Rick Caruso, who I voted for against Karen Bass because I thought he would be better for the city. He's a Democrat. And what they do is they just toe the party line. And right now, the party line is migrants and vandals and illegal aliens over citizenry. And it makes no sense. It kind of reminds me of when Bernie Sanders got sidelined by the Democratic Party when they realized that he was going to win and they just made it that he couldn't win. And then he continued to toe the party line. These people are just in the machine. They need new leadership. We need new leadership, as Judah said, who just say the truth. Tell us what we know. Don't lie and say that this is about being racist or trying to kick people out that belong here. This is about rounding up people who do not belong here, and by the riots that they're acting out on, they're proving the point. They do not belong here. If that's the way you're going to behave, if you're going to burn down our cities and run around with foreign flags, get out.
Yeah, but you know what? I have to say one thing is Rick Caruso didn't feel that way. That's why it's so disappointing. Don't forget, Rick Caruso started off as a Republican. Then he became an independent. Then he became a Democrat. And even as a Democrat, though, he's kind of centrist, even right-leaning on certain things. That's one of the reasons why this feels like such a betrayal, why it was such a weak-kneed kind of decision to make, because this wasn't who he was. He wasn't always towing the company line. And it feels like right now he just decided, hey, you know what? I think I want to move up in the political sphere. So what do you guys need me to say? Whatever you need. It just feels cowardly.
He's reversed Michael Bloomberg. And it's important to note that this is just coming out. Los Angeles Police Department Chief Jim McDonald revealed during a press conference that the violence is getting increasingly worse and more violent since the riots first started over the weekend. McDonald also added that protesters were shooting commercial-grade fireworks at LAPD officers. McDonald also revealed that he respects U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents, adding they are fellow law enforcement agency. And this is a big thing for the head of the police department to come out in Los Angeles and say he's got to protect his police officer.
First of all, that police chief will probably be fired by tomorrow. Rick Caruso, who is a billionaire who you didn't think could be bought off, he's just falling in line with the party. Now, what did they do to him when he was running? Because he was winning. They threw everything at him. Obama got on a plane and flew to LA to campaign for Karen Bass, the person he was running against. And every single other Democratic leader, from Bernie Sanders to AOC, they all came out to support his opponent. And now he is kissing their ass. He's going with the lies that they are telling him to tell about what's going on in our city. He is not a savior. He's just a shill.
Just one little thing to add, which is McDonald, that, oh my God, he's going to be fired tomorrow. Don't worry. He also made clear, he was interviewed not long ago, I'm talking about a couple days ago, where he said, don't worry, everybody in Los Angeles. We do not enforce immigration laws. He said those words. He said, this is a practice that's been in place for decades here. I'm going to quote it. Any immigration enforcement will be undercutting our primary mission, which is to be able to build public trust, to work with every member of all of our communities, to be able to have hope that people will come forward if they were a victim of a crime or a witness to a crime. He is explicitly saying, don't worry, we don't do that shit. So maybe his job is safe after all.
This is Los Angeles. One never knows, and it really is Lord of the Flies we're witnessing right now in the city of Los Angeles. Is everybody's just looking to survive, and more than that, everybody's still looking to be accepted among the elite. At the end of the day, let's be real about people like Rick Caruso. He wants to still be invited to the dinner. He wants to get invited to the galas. This isn't a Trump issue. This is a safety issue. This is a security issue that's going on in the city of Los Angeles that will spread to San Francisco and will spread to other cities across America. Let's not kid ourselves. We've already seen this in 2020 and we are at the beginning of the summer. It's a hop, skip, and a jump. I think it's important for people to know the landscape of California. We have 52 seats in the House, 9 Republicans out of 52. Actually, one are in the House. We have at least 2 million illegal aliens running amok in our city and state, and we have 0 voter ID laws.
No,
So
it's more
this
than
is
that. It's more than that. We don't have 0 voter ID laws. Gavin Newsom passed a law that it's illegal to show ID when you go to vote. It is illegal to show your ID when you go to vote. And they give out DMV licenses to illegal aliens. So this state relies on illegals and their voting, and it's just a circular system. Bring in more, and you will stay in power. This is the same playbook that they used in the BLM riots. So that summer, they figured that way to protest against Trump was to just burn down cities. And I reached out to my brother-in-law who lives in Hollywood Hills, and I was like, hey, you better get your water system, your independent water system, and sprinklers on the roof ready, because they're going to light the hills on fire. They're going to do the exact same thing that they did 3-4 years ago. It's the exact same playbook. They want to burn down the cities, and they think that makes Trump look bad. And the governors and mayors go along with it because they also believe that makes Trump look bad. So you look at Minneapolis, that city still hasn't recovered. The people affected is the inner city communities. They're the ones that have lost jobs, and they've lost resources, and they've lost the ability to purchase goods in normal scenarios because they don't have the stores anymore. And it hasn't come back. You talk about years later. You look at the Watts riots. You were talking about, what is that, 30 years ago? Still hasn't recovered.
Yeah, no, perfectly said. And for people that are not aware of the city of Los Angeles, it's going broke. You drive down some of our most beautiful streets in Los Angeles, all you see is for lease signs. People can't afford to live here. People can't afford to buy here, and people can't afford to shop here. Store owners just cannot afford to stay in business. So eventually it's going to be just massive buildings go on all across this great city, because that's the only thing that could make money at this point. I want to move on, though, because I think this is extremely important before we get to the other news. As we were discussing last week with Musk, I am glad he came back from space yesterday and started posting about this on X. And I think that's extremely important because, as Musk is pointing out, X has become the #1 news aggregate. So for everything bad we're seeing on X, with the hatred towards Israel, the hatred towards America, we're actually seeing what's going on. Something very different that we did not witness in 2020, because all we had was the media. Now we have X showing people the actual videos of what's going on the ground.
Yeah, I mean, Musk came in, he bought Twitter, lost a fortune on it, and he saved democracy. And I'm not talking about just the election. He saved free speech, which is the bedrock. It's a cornerstone of our democracy. He gave voices to the ones that were being silenced by the regime that was in charge, that was silencing Americans, illegally silencing Americans. So we owe him a debt of gratitude.
Moving on to the next topic, which I think is extremely important, as we've discussed, the podcast universe, the social media universe is basically eclipsed the news media, the legacy news media. I would say at this point, almost 100-fold when you look at the numbers of CNN compared to a podcast like Theo Von. Now, J.D. Vance went on the Theo Von podcast, and obviously everybody's a little nervous because we don't always know where people stand. We know where Theo Von stands after he came back from his Saudi Arabia tour of performing in front of the troops, to coming on and saying Israel is committing genocide. And J.D. Vance said, no, Israel's not committing genocide, and war is hell. It brings extra meaning from J.D. Vance, who's actually a veteran. Go on, like yourself.
Absolutely. It's funny because I think Theo Von, I'm trying to be kind, is really the kind of ultimate useful idiot. And I don't mean useful idiot as in just a nasty name like he's a schmuck or something like that. I mean like useful idiot in spycraft, like the Jean Le Carré version of a useful idiot. Useful idiot is basically someone who doesn't know that they're stupid. And so people pump them full of misinformation, and then they repeat the misinformation thinking they're being useful, thinking they've been educated about something, and ultimately are shown to be just a mouthpiece for whatever group has taken advantage of them. He is the perfect version of that. And like you said, it wasn't the Saudi Arabia tour so much, it was the Qatari tour. Showed back up after months, years of never speaking about it, really not getting into politics, and then suddenly felt the need to do a monologue about genocide and about Palestine. And then finally, it just took, again, I come back to the same phrase over and over again, moral clarity. Also reality, which occasionally will smack you in the fucking face, but moral clarity. The fact that J.D. Vance, despite his isolationist tendencies, and despite the fact that people were expecting maybe him to just kind of go where Theo wanted to go because Theo's a popular podcaster, no, J.D. Vance had to say, I'm sorry, you're wrong. And it reminded me of something. Years ago, Jon Stewart, one of the biggest self-hating Jews that exists, the most anti-Israel Jews that exists, was interviewing Hillary Clinton. Whether you like Hillary Clinton or not, this particular interview was chef's kiss beautiful. Because he started off, this is years before this particular exercise in war happening in Israel. And he was like, Israel's the bad guy, and Israel this, and Israel apartheid, all the talking points that already existed back then. And Hillary Clinton just shut him down. I occasionally just watch it just for the fun of watching him just get smacked down by a politician who knows what she's talking about, at least when it comes to that topic. And it's beautiful. And here was a similar thing. He basically said, hey, words matter. You're going to use these words if you feel like it's a genocide. He kept saying, I feel it. Well, it's not a genocide. Words have meaning, and you weaponizing language to delegitimize Israel's right to defend itself, that's a no-go. And JD didn't dance around it. He didn't say maybes. He didn't say perhaps. He said, calling Israel a genocidal state is morally bankrupt and historically illiterate. We're done with that topic now. The adults are in the room. Why don't you go back to talking to people about smoking weed? Period.
Man, to go on's point, I think it was brilliant what J.D. Vance did. I was extremely happy that he did it. And he's probably the only one from this administration that could have done it, because that's where his roots are. His roots are with people like Theo Von and Kid Rock, who hosted the event. That's J.D. Vance's roots. So God bless J.D. Vance for speaking the truth when it would have been a lot easier for him to say, I hear both sides, Theo. And he did not go there, and he came out forcefully, man. We have to give J.D. Vance a lot of credit.
I think beating up on Theo is probably the wrong move. They're seeing what most of the kids in this country are seeing. Hamas and their propaganda machines in Qatar are pumping out content from Gaza, both real and fake. And this is the most, let's say, live streamed or online war that's ever taken place in history. There's nobody pumping out content from the Sudan. Nobody cares about Yemen. Nobody's doing that stuff where there's actual genocide and starvation and hundreds of thousands of people dying. Nobody cares about that. This is the one that they're pumping out. So if you're a young adult who doesn't know much about war and you're seeing these images and you're hearing genocide, you probably could come to that conclusion that says, this feels like a genocide, without understanding what the definition of genocide is, without getting into the fact of who started this, or more importantly, how it could end. If Hamas was to surrender tomorrow and release the hostages, it would be over. This is the first alleged genocide in history where the guys that are being genocided are refusing to end the war. So good on J.D. Vance for setting the record straight. Good on him for going on Theo Von's show and setting the record straight. This is what needs to be done. You need to have adults in the room, unlike the previous administration, which kept on saying, oh, you have a point, or this is what democracy looks like. Yes, your truth. What is it? Your truth. There is no your truth. There is truth. And JD went on there and said, listen, this does not qualify as a genocide. Stop using those words. It just doesn't make sense. You are looking foolish by doing that, because you're exposing that you don't know what genocide is, and you also don't know what war is. War is hell. They started it, and they could end it. So good on J.D. Vance for doing that.
Golan, I know exactly what you're thinking, and I'm going to countermand, and I think 99% of what he just said was absolutely perfect. The one thing I know you're going to disagree with him on is we're not dumping on Theo Von. Theo Von came directly back from Qatar and had these views. So Theo Von is the one that's giving everybody else online talking points after the Qatar trip.
You know what? I am dumping a little bit on Theo Von. If he in fact came back from Qatar and then suddenly found these views because of that trip, but let's assume that didn't happen. Let's assume that he just heard some stuff. And as he says over and over again, I don't really know what I'm talking about, so I'm just going to say some shit online, right? So if that's the fact, if he doesn't know what he's talking about, then here's a thought. If you don't know what the hell you're talking about, maybe keep your mouth shut. Not everything needs your opinion. even if you got a big, or maybe especially if you have a big platform and a big microphone in front of your stupid face, especially when it's built on zero research, zero context, and just pure gut feeling or the rumors you heard, right? We're drowning in noise right now in this world because too many people mistake competence for confidence. They're not the same thing. And he continues to speak about this particular topic as if he knows what he's talking about, but that is not speaking his truth. It's just spreading ignorance. And if he's got that big a platform, that big a microphone, and he's doing that, then he is complicit in making those people who you're talking about, men that I agree with you on. We shouldn't dump on the people who listen to him and then repeat it. He's their guy. Like Rogan's their guy. Like Tucker's their guy. These people who spread misinformation, the people who are with the big platform doing it are the ones that need to be quiet until they know what they're talking about.
Yes, you're right. He probably shouldn't have talked about things he doesn't know what he's talking about. But at the same time, I'm glad that he did, and I'm glad that JD Vance was able to go onto that show and set the record straight. On that note, my kid is giving the commencement speech at school. Therefore, I am out. Have a great day, guys, and I will reconnect with you soon.
Tell your kid to break a leg.
Just because Mendes left, that does not mean the news will stop. So go on to continue. I think it is amazing what JD Vance did, and I think he's the only one that could have pulled off exactly what he did. And so kudos for JD Vance, and kudos to this administration, and kudos to Trump for picking him.
I agree with you completely. I think that what Vance did was necessary. I think Men's right, by the way, that thank God he was able to go on Theo Von's podcast with Theo Von spouting the same terrorist talking points and Vance shutting that stuff down. And I think that it's fascinating, especially for conservatives to be falling into this trap right now. Because if you think about what the social media sites were doing, if you think about what the media was doing, shadow banning conservative voices, shutting down conservative stories, ignoring things that didn't fit the narrative on that side of the equation, they saw it happen to themselves. So for them to suddenly go, hey, I saw it on TikTok. Hey, I heard it on CNN or whatever it is that I don't even know what they're quoting. I guess Qatari officials these days. But for any of that to be happening, and then not recognizing that this is the same pattern that occurred when they were the ones being shut down, when the lies were being told about them, when they were having their voices silenced. How can you possibly have the cognitive dissonance to not recognize that it's you, but it's 2.0? It's you, but flipped. And you're suddenly parroting it like you didn't just go through it yourself.
100% correct, Golan Ramraz. So I want to move on, though, to an extremely important subject matter for you. You do live in Barcelona. A majority of your news intake comes from places like the BBC, The Guardian, the UK Daily Mail. You're getting to see what a lot of Americans don't. And I think the importance of the show is that we touch on subjects that are not wildly reported, but have extreme significance to what's going on around the world. So the man responsible for informing the world about casualties in Gaza ends up being Hamas agent. New documents reveal that Mohammed whatever is in fact a member of Hamas. So Golan, the BBC, who's been reporting, is getting their news and reporting all their news from a Hamas person, from a killer, from a murderer, from a baby killer, from a rapist. That's who the BBC is reporting news from. That's their source.
It does not shock me at all. I mean, it's interesting when it finally gets revealed, but it's not shocking at all. The guy you're talking about is actually, his name is not Mohammed, it's Mahmoud. Common mistake, obviously. He has, since 2005, been a member of the Zaytun Battalion within Hamas. What is the Zaytun Battalion? This is not a battalion just of misinformation. This is not a battalion just of media relations or misinformation. The Zaytun Battalion is the military armed wing within Hamas. That means these are the people who are actually active in tunnel construction, active in concealment of weapons, active in urban guerrilla warfare, IED deployment, sniper operations. This guy, who they've been taking the news from, isn't just one of the talking heads of Hamas. He is an out-and-out real terrorist, and they have been swallowing his bullshit since the day he showed up. He is, interestingly, the spokesperson for the Gaza Civil Defense. Okay, now this is a guy who shows up on BBC. He shows up on NPR. He shows up in the Associated Press. He shows up everywhere. He is the guy who is literally delivering the news about Gaza to the international world media. What is the Gaza Civil Defense? Well, I know we have a lot of nicknames for these organizations. So, for example, when we say the Gaza Health Ministry, interesting, some of the same words, the Gaza Civil Defense, all of these names simply mean Hamas. These are new documents that prove that the Gaza Civil Defense spokesperson is actually a member of Hamas, and this Gaza Civil Defense is a division of Hamas. He's issued hundreds of statements up until now, many of them swallowed whole cloth verbatim by the international media. And now there is proof that almost all of them are fictional. And if not fictional, at least the information has been skewed or without context or leaving out crucial pieces of information in order to make it seem like Israel is the bad guy. Over and over and over again. The interesting thing about it is not that Hamas had a terrorist reporting the news to all of the news media, and the news media swallowed it and regurgitated it for the masses. That's not interesting. We kind of know that already because we've seen it over and over again, that sometimes even when they know it's coming directly from Hamas, when they don't even hide it under the subterfuge of another title, they still copy it verbatim. So that's not a shock. The shock is that this guy, they actually held up as a bastion of truth. They didn't even do any vetting to see where he was coming from, who his sources were, or anything else. Now when they say the Gaza Health Ministry, they say run by Hamas. It's kind of an aside to let the Jews know, no, we heard you. We're still going to repeat it, but we heard you. Here, they said this guy is an independent journalist who has verified this information, who is a trusted source, and so therefore these pieces of terrorist propaganda that we are feeding you, this is vetted, and you can believe it, and go ahead and use it on TikTok. Go ahead and use it on social media. Go ahead and use it when you attack Jews in the streets, because this is truth. And this guy was as Hamas as any of them.
I think it's awfully ironic that they call it the Gaza Health Ministry. I mean, there's so much irony in that title. But to a bigger point on this is where people like Tucker get their talking points. Okay, Tucker Carlson, Pierce Morgan, all these people are getting their talking points from a Hamas terrorist. And that's just the reality. And many people are being indoctrinated by people like Tucker Carlson, Pierce Morgan, and it goes down the list because they're like the rabbi. Well, Tucker's like the rabbi of the podcast movement. And it just trickles down. It's the trickle down effect. And if Tucker says it, well, he used to be on Fox News and he sounds brilliant when he speaks and he's read books that nobody. You know who Tucker reminds me of? Remember Good Will Hunting? He reminds me of that student that Matt Damon got into the argument with about quoting Yeats.
How do you like that apples guy?
Right, that exactly right. It's Dean Winter's brother who he had that argument with. But that's who Tucker Carlson is. He reads abstract books that nobody has heard of. So if you go on his show, you can't possibly debate because nobody's ever heard of these books. And that's who Tucker uses.
Probably Tucker is the most upset he's ever been because you called him a rabbi. And that is an anti-Semitic dude. So you may have just actually burned a bridge. You guys are no longer poker buddies anymore.
Finally, on this topic, the BBC apparently took my advice. And the latest report of the amount killed as they were going to get aid is 6 people. So it's gone from hundreds being killed to 50 to 20. Now they're at 6. Again, a little more believable, but probably 100% untrue. And that is the BBC for everybody. And I bring this up simply because this is news that people are not getting. These are stories that people are not getting. They're not getting into people's feeds, but this is the news.
You better believe they got the news story when it was hundreds. Because now these number adjustments are not going to trickle down to them. They are going to continue to say the same things they've been saying, just like we've seen with all the other lies. I'm still seeing people post about the 14,000 babies. I'm still seeing people post about the hospital from years ago. I'm still seeing people post about this stuff because the retraction doesn't matter. The incitement does.
You know, years ago, obviously with Trump, it's Charlottesville, it'll be everything. Hannity had sued somebody for making accusations, and Bill O'Reilly went on his show. This was after he had gotten fired from Fox, And he said to Hannity, I wish I would have done what you did. And that was fight back and sue. And this is something Trump really understands. Most Republicans do not. And I think you will remember Ariel Sharon when he sued Time magazine, I believe it was in 1983, for being called the same thing. And he actually won the case, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. But either way, he fought back.
Sharon did win that lawsuit. Famously, not only did they accuse him of being involved with some assassination or some massacre that he had nothing to do with, they just were doing the same thing they're doing today. Blood libel on blood libel on blood libel. It's the same thing. Everyone who says to me, Netanyahu's the problem. As soon as Netanyahu's out of office, everything's going to regulate. I beg you, go look at your history. The people who want to be anti-Semitic are going to be anti-Semitic. People who want to be anti-Israel are anti-Israel. If they're Jew haters, they're Jew haters. Everything else is just an excuse. The people who are saying what they're saying right now were saying it before the war in Gaza started, before Netanyahu was in office. They'll say it after Netanyahu is in office, and they'll say it after the war in Gaza is finished. This doesn't change. And this shows you that this is decades and decades ago. They were already doing this. And in that particular case, he sued them and they lost.
If people would just follow political leaders that are being slandered, and I wish Fetterman would do the same thing. I wish anybody that's being slandered by the media, by people inside their own party, would do the same thing. Not everybody is above the law. This is the biggest thing that conservatives in America have been trying to fight for God knows how many years, is fighting the rumor and just getting in the news. And that's really what we're trying to do, is get rid of the rumors, because that's all people are reading online. You're right. The fact that people are continually repeating stories that we know to be 100% not true. And we're witnessing that with Greta Thunberg, as she's on, as the New York Post calls it, the selfie flotilla. And you have 12 people on this thing, an actor, whatever, an activist, whatever it is. And any other country go on, if a flotilla was going into them, let's say that flotilla was going into North Korea, let's see how close they make it to the shores of North Korea. Let's see how closely they make it to the shores of Russia. Let's not forget, in 1983, Russia shot a Chinese airplane, I believe it was, out of the sky because they went into Russian airspace, and Russia supposedly thought it was a military airplane. But any other country go on, except for Israel. Israel is always held to the highest of standards, and America is held to the second highest of standards.
In the end, this is this little girl who was a climate activist or climate justice or whatever the hell she was calling herself until she became a terrorist supporter. And this person who cared so much about the climate and so much about the environment and so much about the oceans and so much about pollution, do you know what she did the minute Israel showed up and stopped the flotilla? It's my favorite part of the story. Everyone on board threw all of their phones and laptops into the ocean. First of all, that doesn't seem like it's good for the environment. Second of all, man, nothing says that you are innocent more than throwing all your shit overboard the minute the authorities arrive. That's like everyone at the party rushing into the bathroom and trying to flush down their weed the minute the cops show up. I think maybe they did the right thing.
I think it's also extremely important what Israel is doing. They are showing them the video of what happened on October 7th. They are showing them the 43 minutes of what Hamas did and the atrocities. And anybody, I witnessed that video, pretty much the moment it came out. And it was an extremely traumatic experience for me. And I hope it has a percentage of what it did to me that it does for them.
You know, that video, which I have also seen, there are no words. You know, there's no way to look at that and to feel nothing unless you are just soulless, heartless, monstrous. I think that with Greta, don't forget, this is, I mean, I know people make fun of her, but this is genuinely an abused autistic child who has been manipulated into doing everything that she's doing, has now gotten a taste of fame, and keeps jumping from place to place to make sure that she remains on camera. This is why she went to Gaza and not to any of the other places where actual genocides are happening. This is why it's called the selfie flotilla. This is why the pictures of her on her little boat holding whatever that was, a margarita or whatever she was drinking, they're cosplay silliness. This is someone who, poor girl, has been fooled into doing this, that there's a possibility that she will have shut down the parts of her brain, the parts that are actually working even, that make her feel empathy, that make her realize what reality is. She's so dug in. A number of years ago, I listened to a podcast, Dan Senora's podcast, called Call Me Back, and he had a college professor on. And the college professor said something that chilled me to my bones. I'll make it short. He was talking about how many of the kids in his class came to him after October 7th and said they did not know how to respond. They didn't know how to react. They didn't know enough. So they were just keeping their mouths shut. And then they found a movement on campus that said, if you keep your mouth shut, you're complicit. So you have to make a choice. And because they felt the pressure to make a choice, but they didn't know anything, they looked to the people who felt confident enough to say something. And as we know, after October 7th, the Israelis took a very long time to confirm what actually was happening. They were very careful and meticulous and measured and ethical and did everything with values. On the other side, they just announced numbers arbitrarily. They just made it very clear who's evil and who's good. In other words, the people who were, quote unquote, confident enough to immediately make a call were people that were pro-terrorist, people that were anti-Israel, because it's the only thing they knew to do, was just to take the hard line, the company line, and just push it out into the world. And therefore, those students who felt the need to make a decision made the decision to copy paste whatever they had said. They seemed so confident. I will say the same thing. So they automatically went to the side of pro-Palestine. Once information came out and they realized they were wrong, this is what the professor said. He said they came to him and said, I can't reverse what I said. Because if I reverse what I said, it'll show that I just put a post up about something I didn't know anything about. That'll make me look stupid. Or it'll make it look like I just copy pasted someone else's answer. So now, even though I know I'm wrong and Israel is the right side of this equation, I have to double down. Simply because I can't allow my reputation, I can't allow even my own internal morality. Did I just advocate for terrorists because I was ignorant? I can't subconsciously even allow myself to do that. So they all doubled down. I think Greta might be in that boat. So I think she might be there, where if they show her that, she's so blind, she's so stuck in her way, she may still not come around. But I pray that you're right, and I pray that jars them loose from this ideology.
Wow, I forgot what point I brought up, but extremely well said, Cole on Ross. And as we finish up, I'm not trying to pat our own backs, but had we reported on certain events last week, we would have said that Israel is going to have snap elections this week, which I don't see happening at this point. And I'm glad we did not report that story. And quite a few other stories I'm glad we didn't talk about. Netanyahu just got off the phone with Trump about Iran, and we will be talking more about that tomorrow. There's no point in speculating what the phone call was about until we know. And on that note, I want to thank everybody who's been following us on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, Instagram, X at TD Cheat Sheet. Follow us wherever you can, please. Also, give us a 5-star review, write a nice rating, and that means the world to us. It helps us out. I want to thank you. And on that note, have a good morning, afternoon, and night world, wherever you are.